I opened my mailbox and found a wedding invitation for my son dated 3 weeks ago. The wedding was yesterday. I called him and he said coldly, "You didn't need to be there, Mom." I hung up, made one phone call to my lawyer, and the next morning my son discovered something that made him beg. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching, get comfortable and relax, let's begin. My finger caught on the edge of the envelope as I pulled the day's mail from the box. The paper was thick, a creamy, expensive stock that felt foreign among the utility bills and grocery flyers. The address was typed in an elegant font, Mrs. Alina Vance. No Ellie. I carried the stack inside, the weight of that one envelope distinct. I set the rest on the kitchen table and held this one under the afternoon light streaming through the window over the sink. The return address was embossed. I did not recognize the street name, but the city was his. A formal occasion, then. My thumbnail slid under the flap. It came open with a clean, crisp sound. The card inside was heavy. 2 names were printed in swirling script, Mr. Marcus Thorne and Ms. Chloe Renard. The words, "Request the pleasure of your company," floated beneath them. My eyes moved to the date and time. The location was a vineyard I had heard of, known for its views. Then I saw the year, the month, the day. My breath stopped. I checked the calendar on the wall, the one with photos of gardens. I counted the days in my head, then counted again. The wedding was 3 weeks ago, yesterday. The card did not tremble in my hand. It was utterly still. I placed it flat on the worn wooden table. I looked at the telephone on the wall, the one with the long cord. I walked to it. I dialed his number from memory. Each rotary click was a deliberate, mechanical sound in the quiet house. It rang, once, twice. Hello. His voice. There was music in the background, light conversation, the clink of glassware. A party. A post-wedding brunch, perhaps. Marcus. A pause, the background noise muffled as if he had covered the receiver. Mom, hey! His tone was not warm, it was careful. I just opened the mail. My voice was calm. It sounded like my voice. Okay. I received an invitation to your wedding. Another pause, longer. The muffled sounds sharpened again. He had not moved to a private room. Right. The date on it was for yesterday. Yes. I closed my eyes. You were married yesterday. That's correct. His words were precise, as if he were stating a fact to a colleague. And you did not think to call me, to tell me, to ensure I had received this. I gestured at the card, though he could not see it. We sent invitations to the list. His voice took on a patient, explanatory quality. The postal service can be unreliable. Marcus, I said his name to stop the explanation. I am your mother. The silence on his end was different now. It was full of a decision already made. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, firmer. Look, Mom, it was a small ceremony, very intimate, just close friends and Chloe's family. It wasn't a big thing. I see. It wasn't that you weren't invited. You were, but you didn't need to be there. He said it plainly. The sentence hung between us. You didn't need to be there. I saw my hand holding the receiver. My knuckles were white. What does that mean? I asked. He exhaled, a sound of mild frustration. It means it wasn't that kind of event. It was simpler this way. Less complicated. Complicated, I repeated the word. Yes, he affirmed it. This was for the best, really. From the background, a woman's laugh floated down the line. A bright, carefree sound. Chloe. I imagined her in a white dress, surrounded by her family. I saw my son beside her in a suit I had not seen. I have to go, Marcus said. We have guests. Of course. Don't make this a thing, Mom. Okay, it's done. I did not answer. Okay, he pressed. Goodbye, Marcus. I heard the beginning of his reply, but I placed the receiver back into its cradle. The click was final. The house absorbed the sound and returned to silence. I stood at the wall phone for a full minute. Then I walked back to the table. I sat in my usual chair. The invitation lay before me, a pristine rectangle on the scarred wood. The late afternoon sun hit it, making the cream color glow. It was a beautiful object. It spoke of taste and money and a life that had moved on. I thought of the day he was born, the long, difficult labor. The first time I held him, I thought of teaching him to tie his shoes on these same floor tiles. I thought of the nights I worked double shifts at the hospital, coming home to check his homework while still in my nurse's scrubs. The smell of antiseptic on my skin. The second mortgage I took to cover his first semester at a university he chose. The sound of his voice thanking me, his arms around me. I looked at the card, Mr. Marcus Thorne. He used his father's surname, the one I never took, a choice I had respected. You didn't need to be there. The words were not shouted. They were delivered with casual finality. They were not the words of a heated argument. They were a policy statement. I reached out and touched the edge of the card. The paper was as smooth as stone. I traced the letters of his name. Then I stood. I picked up the invitation, walked to the small desk in the corner of the living room, and opened the top drawer. Inside were neat compartments, stamps, notepads, a checkbook. I slid the invitation into the back of the drawer, face down. I closed the drawer. I returned to the kitchen. I put the kettle on the stove. I took a single cup and saucer from the cupboard. I moved through the steps of making tea, my hands performing their familiar tasks. The water boiled. I poured it over the tea bag. I watched the brown cloud bloom. I carried the cup to the table and sat again. The steam rose in a thin column. I did not drink. I watched the light in the room change as the sun began to set. The warm yellow glow deepened to orange, then to a cool blue. The betrayal was not in the forgotten invitation. That was a logistical error, a possible oversight. The betrayal was in the phone call, in his voice, in the chosen words. He had considered my absence. He had decided it was for the best. He had constructed a world where his mother was a complication to be managed. I felt a hollow space open inside my chest. It was not an ache. It was an absence, a void where a fundamental certainty had lived for 32 years. I finished my tea when it was cold. I washed the cup and saucer and placed them in the drying rack. I turned off the kitchen light. I walked through the dark living room, past the photos on the mantel that chronicled his life, and by extension, mine. I did not look at them. In my bedroom, I prepared for bed. I brushed my hair, 100 strokes as I always did. I looked at my face in the mirror. A 58-year-old woman with silver streaks in her hair and a steady gaze. The face of a person who had solved countless problems, who had soothed fears, who had built a life from very little. That woman in the mirror looked back at me. Her eyes were not wet. They were clear and assessing. She had received new data. A fundamental variable had changed. I turned off the light and lay in the dark. The house was silent, but the silence was different now. It was no longer peaceful. It was waiting. I stared at the ceiling. I began to calculate. I did not sleep. When the first gray light of morning filtered through the blinds, I rose. The hollow feeling had crystallized into something solid and sharp. I dressed in slacks and a simple sweater. I made coffee, the routine mechanical. The pot percolated, filling the kitchen with a familiar scent that now felt disconnected from comfort. I carried my cup to the living room. I did not turn on the television. I went to the hallway closet, the one that held old linens and winter coats. On the top shelf at the back was a medium-sized cardboard box. I brought it down, the dust making a faint cloud in the morning light. I set it on the coffee table. The box was not sentimental. It was an archive. I lifted the lid. On top were photograph albums. I opened the first one. Pictures of a boy with gap-toothed smiles, school portraits, a graduation ceremony where I stood beside him in a dress I had sewn myself. I turned the pages. The images were documents, proof of attendance, evidence of a life built. Beneath the albums were file folders. I removed them. One was labeled education. Inside were bank statements, copies of loan applications, and the promissory note for the second mortgage on this house. The numbers were precise. Tuition for his freshman year, the cost of books, the dormitory fees. My signature was on every line. Another folder was marked correspondence. I sifted through it. Birthday cards he made as a child, construction paper and crayon. Later, store-bought cards with brief messages. Thanks for everything, Mom. You're the best. A few letters from his first year away at college, written on lined notebook paper describing his classes. The handwriting evolved from unsure to confident. The frequency of the letters diminished, then stopped. I put the folders aside. At the bottom of the box was a small, locked metal strongbox. I knew where the key was. I retrieved it from a dish on my dresser. The lock turned with a click. Inside were not jewels. There were more papers. The title to my car long since traded in, the deed to this house, and a single folded sheet of paper, the edges soft from age. I opened it. It was a list written in my own hand from over a decade ago. At the top it said Paris estimated costs. Below were items: airfare, hotel, meals, museum passes. A total was circled at the bottom. Next to it I had written another note: M freshman year dorm deposit plus books. An arrow was drawn from the Paris total to the other sum. A decision, recorded in ink. I had not wept when I made that list. I had felt a pang, then a resolve. His need was greater than my want. It was a simple equation. I looked at the documents spread across my coffee table. They formed a ledger, a balance sheet of a life. On one side, the withdrawals, my labor, my time, my money, my deferred dreams. On the other side, the deposit, his success. I had never considered the balance. I had assumed the account was infinite, the debt one of love, not to be tallied. His words on the phone had closed that account. You didn't need to be there. It was a statement of zero balance, a declaration that my lifetime of deposits had earned no equity in his life. A cold clarity settled over me. If this was a matter of accounts, then the accounts were now in error. I had given what was never asked for, and it had been received as an entitlement. The gift had been mistaken for a grant. That was a correctable error. I began to sort the papers into two new piles. One pile was the evidence of sentimental history, the photos, the cards. I placed them back into the cardboard box. That was the past. It was closed. The second pile was the evidence of financial transaction, the loan documents, the mortgage papers, the bank statements showing transfers from my account to his, for his first car, for his security deposit on an apartment. A record of every monetary injection that had propelled him forward. There was one more thing. In my desk, in a separate filing cabinet, I kept the current documents. I retrieved this file. It contained the paperwork for a condominium. The purchase was 2 years old. The down payment had come from a joint savings account I had started for him when he was a child. I had matched every dollar he saved from summer jobs. When he was ready to buy, the account had a substantial sum. My name was still on the account as a custodian. I had never removed it. The file also held a copy of a personal loan. When his new job required a specific wardrobe and a reliable luxury vehicle to make an impression, he had come to me. The bank would give him the loan, but the interest rate was high. Would I co-sign? I had. My signature was next to his, a guarantee. I laid these current documents beside the historical ones. The chain was unbroken. From his first bicycle to his downtown condominium, the infrastructure of his life was built with capital I had provided, either directly or through my credit. I made a pot of strong tea. I sat at the kitchen table with a blank notepad and a pen. I did not write a journal entry. I did not write my feelings. I created a list. At the top, I wrote assets in question. 1. Custodial savings account, down payment source. 2. Co-signed personal loan, vehicle startup costs. 3. Historical debts, college, moral leverage. I then wrote possible actions. 1. Remove self from custodial account. Requires his consent. 2. Demand full repayment of co-signed loan. My right as co-signer. 3. Recall loan via bank stipulations. To be investigated. I needed an expert. I needed Beverly. I looked at the clock. It was still early on a Saturday. Beverly would be at her home, likely reading the paper with her own coffee. We had been friends since nursing school, though our paths had diverged. She had gone on to law school. I had stayed at the hospital. We had seen each other through divorces, hers amicable, mine less so. She knew the cost of Marcus. She had listened to me fret over tuition bills for years. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. It rang 3 times. Ellie, her voice was warm, edged with sleep. Everything all right? No, I said. My voice was even. It is not. I need to speak with you, in a professional capacity. The line was quiet for a moment. I heard the rustle of her sitting up. Professional capacity, I see. What happened? Marcus was married yesterday. I was not informed. I received the invitation today. It was mailed 3 weeks late. Beverly inhaled sharply. Oh, Ellie. When I called him, I continued, he stated my presence was not necessary, that it was for the best. I relayed his words without inflection. That little ingrate, she murmured. Then her tone shifted, becoming crisp. And you want to discuss your legal and financial ties to him? Yes, I want to understand what leverage I possess. I want to know how to sever the financial lifelines I created, all of them. Okay, she said. I could hear her mind working, the lawyer taking over from the friend. Okay, don't do anything, don't call him, don't sign anything. Gather every document you have that links you to him financially, everything from college to now. Bring it to my office on Monday morning, 9 o'clock. I have already gathered it, I said. A pause. Good, that's good, Ellie, we'll look at it together. We'll see what your options are. Thank you, Beverly. Don't thank me yet. Her voice softened again, just for a second. I'm sorry he did this. You deserve better. I did not reply to that. The concept of what I deserved felt vast and unknown. I will see you Monday at 9. I hung up. I looked at the list on the table. I looked at the stacks of paper. The sentimental box was back in the closet. The transactional documents were neatly organized in my leather portfolio, ready for transport. I spent the rest of the weekend in a state of quiet preparation. I cleaned my house. I tended my garden. I cooked simple meals. Each action was deliberate, a reaffirmation of my own competence. The grief was there, a heavy stone in my stomach, but I did not probe it. I let it be. It was data. It was the fuel for the engine of my will. On Monday morning, I dressed with care. A navy blue suit I wore for important occasions. I polished my shoes. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. The woman who looked back was not a heartbroken mother. She was a claimant. She had a case to present. I picked up the portfolio. It had a satisfying weight. It held the evidence. It held the balance due. The reception area of Carter and Associates was quiet on a Monday morning. The carpet was a deep gray, the walls a pale cream. A young man at the front desk nodded as I entered. Mrs. Vance, Ms. Carter is expecting you. Go right in. Beverly's office was at the end of a short hallway. The door was open. She stood as I appeared in the doorway. She was dressed in a tailored burgundy suit, her glasses perched on her head. Her expression was professional, but her eyes held a familiar warmth, quickly banked. Ellie, come in, close the door. I did. I took the seat opposite her expansive, orderly desk. I placed my leather portfolio on the polished surface between us. Coffee, she asked. No, thank you. She sat, lacing her fingers together on the desk. All right, tell me everything. Start from the beginning. I recounted the events of the last few days, finding the invitation, the date, the phone call. I repeated his sentences verbatim. My voice remained steady. I presented it as a report. Beverly listened without interruption. Her face was impassive, but a muscle tightened in her jaw when I relayed the phrase, "You didn't need to be there." When I finished, she let out a slow breath. I am so very sorry, Ellie. That is a profound betrayal. She leaned forward. Now, you said on the phone you want to sever financial lifelines. Explain what you mean. I opened the portfolio. I laid out the documents in the order I had organized them. These are the historical records, the second mortgage for his undergraduate degree, records of monthly support during his graduate program. They are paid off, but they establish a pattern of dependency. Beverly glanced at them, nodding. These are the current entanglements. I presented the first page. A custodial savings account opened when he was 12. I was the custodian. We both contributed. The balance was used for the down payment on his condominium 2 years ago. My name is still on the account. Have you discussed removing your name? No, it was never an issue. I considered it his money. But legally, as the custodian, you still have control over that account. Beverly stated. Depending on the terms, you may be able to withdraw funds or at least freeze them. Let me see the signature card. I handed it to her. She studied it. Next, I said, placing another document before her. A personal loan from First Mercantile Bank taken out 18 months ago for $60,000. I am a cosigner. The purpose was for a vehicle and professional startup costs. He makes the payments, but my credit is the guarantee. Beverly took the loan agreement. Standard joint and several liability clause, meaning the bank can demand full repayment from either signatory at their discretion, should they deem the loan at risk. Is it at risk? I asked. It is if the cosigner declares she is withdrawing her guarantee and demands the loan be called due, she said, a sharp look in her eyes. The bank would then contact the primary borrower, Marcus, and demand full repayment. If he cannot pay, they would pursue collections against both of you, but the primary pressure would be on him to refinance immediately, alone, likely at a much higher rate, or sell the asset. I absorbed this. It was a concrete mechanism. I want to do that. There's more, I continued. I slid forward a final sheet. This is a list, not a legal document. It is an accounting of every major financial injection I have provided since he turned 18. The total is substantial. It is the moral context. Beverly read the list. Her eyebrows rose slightly. This is comprehensive, the Paris trip. A choice, one of many. She set the paper down and leaned back in her chair, looking at me. Ellie, what is your desired outcome? Is it to hurt him, to get his attention, to get an apology? I considered the question. I had asked it of myself in the quiet of the weekend. The apology, if it comes, will be meaningless if it is only coerced by financial pain. I do not wish to see him destitute. I wish to correct the accounting error. He believes he is self-made. He is not. I wish for him to understand the true cost of the life he lives. I wish to reclaim what is mine, my financial security, which I jeopardized for him. And I wish to do it in a way that is legal, irrevocable, and forces him to see the structure he took for granted. Beverly nodded slowly, a look of approval on her face. Good, a clear objective. Emotion is the motive, but the law is the tool. We can do this. She tapped the loan document. The cosigned loan is our sharpest tool. I will contact the bank on your behalf as your counsel. We will formally notify them that you are withdrawing your guarantee due to a material change in your relationship with the primary borrower. We will request the loan be called. They are not obligated to agree, but in my experience, with a loan of this size and a cosigner formally withdrawing, they will act to protect their asset. They will call it. And the custodial account. That is trickier. As a custodian, you have a fiduciary duty. However, the account was for his benefit, and he is now well past the age of majority. The fact that the funds were used for a down payment complicates it. He could argue you are acting in bad faith. We could petition to have your name removed and the account transferred solely to him, but that doesn't achieve your goal. She thought for a moment. A stronger move is to do nothing with that account for now. Its existence is a point of leverage. We can mention it later, if necessary, as an example of the financial ties he has been happy to ignore. What will happen when the bank contacts him? He will panic, Beverly said simply. He will call you. He will be angry. Then he will be desperate. You must be prepared not to answer. Or if you do answer, to say only that you have taken legal and financial steps to secure your own future, and he should direct all questions to your attorney, which will be me. I can do that. I know you can. She smiled, a thin, professional smile. Now, for this to proceed, I need a retainer, and I need you to sign a letter of engagement and several authorizations allowing me to speak to the bank on your behalf. What is the retainer? She named a figure. It was fair. I wrote the check from my personal account. The act of signing it felt significant. It was the first monetary investment in my own future, rather than his. For the next hour, we worked through the paperwork. Beverly explained each document. I read them carefully before signing my name. Each signature was a deliberate stroke, a reclaiming of authority. When we were finished, she gathered the copies. I will have my assistant file these. I will call the bank this afternoon. You should expect the first tremors within a few days, a week at most. I stood. The portfolio was lighter now, containing only my copies. "Thank you, Beverly." She came around the desk and placed a hand on my arm. "This is not vengeance, Ellie. This is justice. A rebalancing. You gave him wings. It's time he felt the weight of the air beneath them." I nodded. I had no poetic reply. The metaphors did not matter. The mechanism was now in motion. I left the office building. The morning sun was bright. I walked to my car, a sensible sedan that was fully paid for. I sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. I felt no exhilaration, no dread. I felt a focused clarity. I had consulted an expert. I had employed a professional. I had set a course of action. The next move was no longer mine. It was his. He would be forced to make it. And when he did, I would be ready. The mother who answered the phone in shock was gone. In her place was a client, a party to a dispute, a woman with a lawyer. I drove home. The house was as I had left it. Quiet, ordered, mine. I made lunch. I reviewed the copies of the documents I had signed. I understood them. I placed them in the now empty strongbox and locked it. The key went back into the dish on my dresser. Then I waited. I did not wait anxiously. I waited like a surgeon waits for the anesthesia to take effect before making the first, necessary incision. The waiting was part of the process. The waiting period Beverly described was 5 business days. On the morning of the 6th day, my telephone rang. I was in the garden, weeding the flower beds beside the porch. I wiped my hands on my trousers and went inside. I looked at the caller ID display on the kitchen phone. It was his number. I watched it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. The answering machine, an old model with a cassette tape, clicked on after the 4th ring. My recorded voice stated the number and asked the caller to leave a message. The beep sounded. "Mom, hey, it's Marcus." His voice was tense, artificially light. "Listen, I just got a weird letter from the bank about the car loan, the one we co-signed. They're saying something about reviewing the guarantee, calling it a portfolio review. It's probably just a clerical thing, but they mentioned your name. Could you give them a call and straighten it out? Just tell them it's fine. Thanks, okay, call me." The line went dead. I deleted the message. The mechanism had engaged. The first tremor. I returned to the garden. The sun was warm on my back. I finished the weeding, then watered the plants. The phone did not ring again that day. The next day, there were 2 calls. The first came in the early afternoon. Again, I let the machine answer. "Mom, it's me again." The artificial lightness was gone. His tone was strained. "I called the bank. They weren't helpful. They said the cosigner has initiated a withdrawal of guarantee. They said they're calling the note. They're demanding full repayment of the remaining balance within 30 days. This is $52,000. What is going on? Did you do something? You need to call them back and fix this. Today." I erased the message. The second call came just after 6 in the evening. This time, his voice was sharp, edged with anger he could no longer conceal. "Eleanor," he used my given name, a formality, a weapon. "I am not playing games. I spoke to a manager at the bank. He said my attorney should contact yours. He said the instruction came from Beverly Carter's office. You got a lawyer over a wedding invitation. Are you insane? Call me. Now, we need to talk about this." I listened. I deleted. The anger was expected. It was phase 1. I fixed myself dinner. I ate at the kitchen table, reading a library book. The silence in the house was no longer waiting. It was active. It was filled with the echoes of his panic, which I had orchestrated. I felt no pleasure in it. I noted it, the way a technician notes a gauge reading. 2 days later, a new pattern emerged. The calls began early in the morning, before business hours. The first was at 7:15. "Mom, please." His voice was thick, ragged. He had been drinking or he had not slept. She's upset. Her parents are asking questions. This is a mess. Just call the bank. Tell them you made a mistake. I'll come over. We can talk about the wedding. I can explain." I deleted it. At 9:05, the mortgage broker called for the condo. The bank's review has flagged the co-signed loan as in default proceedings. It's affecting my credit score. They're talking about a reassessment of my mortgage rate at renewal. Do you understand what you're doing? I did understand. I continued with my morning. I went to the grocery store. I bought the items on my list. The world outside was normal. People pushed carts, chose produce, chatted at the checkout. My world had contracted to a series of financial triggers and their consequences, all contained within the shell of my ordinary life. When I returned, there was another message. This one was different. It was a woman's voice. Young, polished, strained. "Mrs. Vance, this is Chloe, Marcus's wife." She pronounced it Vance, not the way I said it. "I'm sure you're trying to teach him some kind of lesson, and I get that you were hurt about the wedding. It was a misunderstanding with the mail. But what you're doing now it's destructive. It's affecting our lives, our plans. We're newlyweds. Please be the bigger person. Call off your lawyer. Let's have a civilized lunch and sort this out." Her message was a strategy, an appeal to my supposed sentimentality, framed as a call to maturity. Be the bigger person. It was the language of someone who had always been allowed to be the smaller person and get away with it. I deleted it. That evening, Beverly called me. "Ellie, just a status update. The bank has formally called the loan. Marcus has been served with a demand letter. He has 30 days to remit the full balance. My office has also received a call from an attorney representing him, a junior associate at a corporate firm, clearly scrambling. He proposed a conference call to resolve the family dispute. I declined. I stated that there is no family dispute before this office, only a financial matter between a creditor and a debtor. I told him all communication should be in writing. He was flustered. "Thank you, Beverly. How are you holding up? The calls?" "They are ongoing. I do not answer." "Good, let the pressure build. He's just feeling the financial pinch now. The social and personal consequences come next. Are you prepared?" "I am." I was. The calls were not a torment to me. They were data points. Each message charted the progression of his crisis. Confusion, anger, negotiation, pleading. I was unmoved because I had already moved. I had crossed a line within myself. The person he was calling no longer existed. The final call of the week came late on Friday night. The machine recorded the time, 11:47 p.m. His voice was a low, desperate monotone, all pretense stripped away. "Mom, they're saying if I don't pay, they'll repo the car. It's a lease, but they can still take it. My credit is tanking. Chloe's parents, they're asking if I have hidden liabilities. They're talking about a post-nuptial agreement. Everything is falling apart. Please, just tell me what you want. What do you want me to say? I'll say it. I'm sorry about the invitation. Is that it? I'm sorry, okay? Now please make it stop." I listened to the message twice. The apology was there. It was coerced, transactional, a key offered to unlock a vault. It was worthless. He was sorry for the effect, not the cause. He was sorry his infrastructure was cracking, not that he had devalued its architect. I did not delete the message immediately. I saved it. It was evidence, proof of the progression. Then I went to bed. I slept through the night. The following morning was Saturday. I cleaned the house. I changed the linens. I paid my own bills. My life was orderly, solvent, intact. His, by his own report, was spiraling. The balance was beginning to correct itself. The first financial truth had been introduced into his world. Nothing beneath him was solid ground. It was all built on a guarantee he had revoked with a single sentence on the phone. I knew the next phase would not be another call. The phone had failed him. The next move would be physical. He would come here. The angry, entitled confrontation Beverly had predicted. I prepared for that. I ensured the porch light bulb was working. I resolved not to open the door. I reviewed the words I would say. They were simple words, business words. The garden was thriving. I checked the forecast. Clear skies were expected. A good day for a confrontation. I would be ready. The doorbell rang at 7:30 in the evening. The sun had set, but the sky was still a deep twilight blue. I was in the living room, mending a tear in a tablecloth. I set my sewing aside. I stood. I smoothed my sweater. I walked to the front door. I did not open it immediately. I looked through the peephole. He was standing there, illuminated by the porch light I had replaced. He wore an expensive-looking jacket, but it was rumpled. His hair was disheveled. His face was set in hard lines of anger and fatigue. He rang the bell again, a long, impatient press. I unlocked the door and opened it just enough to stand in the gap. I did not step onto the porch. I did not invite him in. "Mom," the word was an accusation. "Marcus, what are you doing?" His voice was loud, meant to intimidate. "You've lost your mind. Do you understand what you've done?" "I understand my actions precisely," I said. My voice was quiet, level. "You called my loan. You're trying to destroy my credit. Over what? A missed wedding. It was a mistake, a postal error." "The postal error is not the issue," I said. "Your words on the phone are the issue. Your decision is the issue." "This is insane." He took a step forward, but I did not yield the doorway. "I'm your son. How could you do this to me?" I looked at him. The man before me was familiar, yet a stranger. The boy I raised was buried under layers of entitlement and borrowed polish. "You made it clear I wasn't family," I said. "You stated my presence was not necessary. You said it was for the best. You defined the relationship. This," I gestured slightly, indicating the space between us, the legal actions. "This is business. You have a business problem with your creditor. I suggest you speak with your attorney." His face flushed with rage. "My attorney? You hired Beverly to attack me. This is a personal vendetta." "It is a financial rectification," I corrected him. "You benefited from my financial support for 32 years. That support was given under the premise of a familial bond. You severed that bond. The support is therefore recalled." "You can't just recall it. That money was gifts. You can't take it back." "The down payment was from a custodial account I control. The loan was co-signed by me. These are not gifts. They are financial instruments with terms. The terms have changed." He stared at me, his breath coming fast. He seemed to be searching for the mother who would soften, who would crumble at his anger. He did not find her. "What do you want? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry you got the invitation late. I'm sorry you were upset. Are you happy now?" "No," I said. "That is not an apology. That is a dismissal. You are sorry for my reaction, not for your action. There is a difference." "You are impossible," he shouted. A neighbor's porch light flicked on down the street. He lowered his voice to a furious hiss. "Chloe's family is asking questions. They think I'm hiding debt. My mortgage is in jeopardy. Do you want to see me homeless? Is that what this is about?" "I want to see you accountable," I said. "I want you to understand that the life you live was not built by you alone. It was built on a foundation I poured with my labor, my credit, my sacrifice. You have enjoyed the house but denied the foundation. Now you are feeling the ground shake. That is the consequence of denying the truth." "You're jealous," he spat, a new thought striking him. "You're jealous of my life, of Chloe, of our success. You're a bitter old woman trying to drag me down." The words were meant to wound. They landed, but they did not penetrate the armor of my clarity. I had already considered that accusation from myself. I had examined it and found it false. This was not about his height, but my depth. "I am not jealous," I stated. "I am balanced. I am correcting an imbalance. My lawyer has all the documentation. The bank has been notified. The process is legal and it is underway. There is nothing for us to discuss here." "I won't let you do this." His voice dropped, becoming threatening. "I'll fight you. I'll sue you." "You are welcome to try. My counsel is prepared. But ask your attorney what your chances are of suing a cosigner for withdrawing a guarantee or a custodian for managing an account. Ask him about the moral weight of the history I can introduce into any proceeding. Ask him if it's a fight you really want." For the first time, a crack appeared in his anger, a flicker of doubt. He had come here expecting to bully his mother into submission. He was encountering a different entity, a party to a contract. "Mom," he said, the words softer now, a plea. "Please, just call it off. We can fix this. We can have dinner. Chloe can come. We can have a proper celebration, just us." The offer was a retreat, a smaller version of the exclusion, a private dinner to replace the public wedding. It was still on his terms. It was still a negotiation where he set the value. "No," I said. "The time for celebration has passed. The matter is now with the professionals. Good night, Marcus." I began to close the door. He put his hand out, stopping it. "You can't just shut me out." I looked at his hand on my door. I looked at him. You shut me out first. You just didn't expect me to lock the door behind you. I pushed the door firmly against his hand. After a second's resistance, he pulled it back. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. The sound was solid, final. I stood in the foyer, listening. I heard his footsteps on the porch, heavy and frustrated. I heard his car door slam. I heard the engine start and the tires squeal as he pulled away. I walked back to the living room. My sewing basket was where I left it. The tablecloth was half mended. I sat down. I picked up the needle and thread. My hands were steady. I completed the stitch, then another. The tear closed, the seam becoming strong again. The confrontation was over. It had followed the predicted course. Anger, blame, attempted negotiation, a feeble threat, a retreat. I had remained firm. I had held the boundary. I had spoken the new language of our relationship: business, accountability, consequence. I felt a tiredness then, but it was a clean tiredness. The tiredness after completing a difficult, necessary task. There was no guilt. There was only the certainty that I had done what I said I would do. He had felt the first real consequence of his choices, and it was not a silent hurt he could ignore. It was a financial demand he could not dismiss. I finished mending the cloth. I folded it and put it away. I turned off the lights and went upstairs. From my bedroom window, I could see the empty street. The porch light still shone on the empty spot where he had stood. It was just a patch of illuminated concrete now. The next phase would be different. The anger had failed. The direct appeal had failed. He would be forced to move to a new stage: calculation, desperation, or perhaps, if he was capable of it, genuine reflection. I did not know which it would be, but I knew the pressure would not relent. The bank's clock was ticking. His social facade was cracking. He was in the crisis, and I was no longer his safety net. I was the architect of the precipice. I drew the curtains. The chapter of the doorstep confrontation was closed. The balance of power had visibly shifted. He knew now that I was not bluffing. The mother was gone. In her place stood a creditor, and creditors have terms. The silence after Marcus's departure was brief. The machinery I had set in motion did not stop. It accelerated. 2 days after the confrontation, Beverly called. The bank has initiated formal default proceedings. They've sent a notice of intent to repossess the vehicle. It's a lease, technically, but they can and will take it. They've also reported the loan as in default to the credit bureaus. His score has dropped significantly. How much time does he have? I asked. The repossession could happen any day. The full balance is still due by the original 30-day deadline, but the collateral is now at immediate risk. He'll be getting notices. Thank you for the update. He hasn't contacted you. Not since he came to the house. He will, she said. The next calls will sound different. She was correct. The messages began again that evening. The tone had shifted. The anger was still present, but it was fractured, diluted by a new, raw panic. The first message: they're taking the car. The bank called. They're coming to get it. I have to surrender it at the dealership. Chloe had to drive me to work today. Her father asked why I wasn't driving my own car. What was I supposed to say? I deleted it. The second message left the following morning. My mortgage broker called. The renewal is coming up. With the credit hit, the rate is going to adjust upward by 2 full points. Do you know what that adds per month? Hundreds. Chloe is talking to her parents about a loan to cover your loan. They're asking for full financial disclosure, a forensic look at my assets. This is humiliating. I listened. I noted the word humiliating. His humiliation was external, social. Mine had been private, visceral. They were not equivalent. A third message arrived that afternoon. It was Chloe's voice again, but the polished tone was gone. It was sharp, cold. Mrs. Vance, I don't know what you hope to accomplish. Marcus is a wreck. My parents they're reconsidering things. Our honeymoon is canceled. We're using the funds to try to cover this. You've poisoned everything. Are you proud of yourself? I was not proud. I was resolved. Her message confirmed a key objective. His support system, the new family he had chosen over the old, was proving conditional. They were reconsidering things. The foundation was cracking. The most telling message came 3 days later. It was very late. His voice was slurred. thick with drink or exhaustion. I had a meeting with her dad today. He gave a short, bitter laugh. A chat in his study. He offered me the money, the 52,000. He can write a check just like that. A pause, the sound of liquid being poured. But there are conditions, a post-nuptial agreement to protect Chloe's future assets. He said it's standard, but it's not standard. It's because of you. He said a man's relationship with his mother is indicative of his character. He said this instability is a concern. Another pause. He asked me point blank how much I owed you. Not just the bank, you over the years. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know. He looked at me like I was a fool. I stood by the answering machine, listening. This was the unraveling. It was not just financial. It was social, personal, psychological. The narrative of his success was being dissected by the very people he had sought to impress. I didn't take his money, Marcus mumbled. I said I'd handle it. I don't know how, but I couldn't sign that paper. It felt like a surrender. The message ended. I saved it. It was a significant data point. He had refused the bailout. Why? Pride. A final shred of something, I was not sure. Beverly called with another update. His attorney contacted us again. He's proposing a settlement. Marcus will sign a promissory note to you for the historical debts at a low interest rate if you reinstate the guarantee on the bank loan. No, I said immediately. I already declined. I counterproposed that we would consider halting further action only upon receipt of a full, detailed accounting of every dollar transferred from you to him since age 18, signed by him as an accurate debt acknowledgement, and a lump sum payment of 20% of that total within 10 days. It's a steep figure, designed to be refused. And they refused. His attorney said it was extortionate. The conversation is over. The bank's process continues. The following week, a letter arrived for me. It was from Marcus, handwritten on expensive stationery. I opened it at the kitchen table. Mom asterisk. I am writing because you won't take my calls. I need you to understand the real-world impact of what you're doing. The car is gone. Chloe's parents have withdrawn an invitation to a family investment retreat. My colleagues are asking questions because I'm taking the bus. My professional image is suffering. This is not just about money. You are dismantling my life. I am asking you, as your son, to stop. Let's sit down with a mediator. We can agree on a financial arrangement. I will pay you back formally over time, but you have to call off the bank. Please. Marcus. The letter was a more formal version of his pleas. It listed consequences, not contrition. It was still a negotiation. He was still trying to manage the problem, not understand its source. I did not reply. I placed the letter in the strongbox with the other documents. The final message of this phase came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. There was no anger left, just a hollow exhaustion. I got the paperwork from the bank, final notice before repossession. It happened this morning. They took it from the parking garage at work. Security called me. Chloe, she's staying with her parents for a few days. She says she needs space to think. Her father's phrase. A long silence. I'm alone in the condo. It's very quiet. I keep looking at the numbers. My salary, the new mortgage payment, the debts. I ran the projections. I can't make it work. Not the way it was. Not without. Without the structure. His voice broke on the last word. The structure. He did not say, without you. He said, without the structure. That was the closest he had come to nomming the thing he had lost. The message ended. I played it once more. I heard the crumbling, not just of his finances, but of his identity. The self-made man was seeing the blueprints, and they were covered in my fingerprints. The offense was over. The desperation was complete. He was now in the freefall. I had planned for this, worked for this. Yet, hearing it, I felt no triumph. I felt a grim validation. The experiment had yielded the predicted result. Remove the foundational support and the building trembles. It was a law of physics. I knew what came next in the sequence. When anger and desperation fail, when the external fixes prove conditional or humiliating, a person is forced inward. They must either break or begin a painful audit of their own choices. I did not know if Marcus was capable of that audit. I had provided the crisis. The response was his to determine. My role was now one of waiting again, but this waiting was different. The financial lever had been pulled. The social consequences were unfolding. The personal devastation was in progress. I had reached the midpoint. The active work of dismantling was largely done. Now I had to see what, if anything, he would build from the rubble. And I had to decide what, if anything, I would be willing to offer when the pleading finally turned from stop to help. The rain from Tuesday continued into Wednesday, a steady gray drizzle. I spent the morning at the kitchen table, reviewing my own finances. With the threat of my guarantee removed, my credit was intact. My retirement fund was modest but sufficient. The house was paid for. I calculated the cost of a new roof, an expense I had delayed. I could afford it now. I scheduled an estimate. In the afternoon, the rain lightened. I put on a raincoat and went to the backyard to check the drainage. The garden was soaked, but the plants were sturdy. As I was inspecting the rose bushes, the telephone rang inside. I finished my task before going in. The machine had taken a message. I pressed play. His voice was clear, but not loud. It had a strange, hollow quality, as if he were speaking from an empty room. "Mom, it's me." A long pause filled with the faint sound of his breathing. "I've been going through boxes, my old things, in the storage locker for the condo." I stood still, listening. I found a box of my stuff from college, notes, textbooks, and at the bottom I found an envelope with your handwriting on it. I did not remember any specific envelope. It was addressed to me at my dorm. The postmark is from my sophomore year. I opened it. He took a shaky breath. It was a brochure for Paris, museums, hotels, a tour package, and a note from you. It said, "For when you graduate, a gift for us both. Love, Mom." I have no memory of this. None. I remembered then. I had sent it in a moment of hopeful planning, a promise to myself as much as to him. He had never mentioned receiving it. I had assumed he lost it, or thought nothing of it. I had buried the disappointment and moved on. "I called the travel agency," he continued, his voice tightening. "The one on the brochure, they're still in business. I gave them my name, yours. The agent looked it up. She said there was a tentative booking, for two, for the summer after my graduation. A deposit was paid, $100 deposit." I had forgotten about the deposit. She said the booking was canceled a few months later. Full refund of the deposit issued. She read me the date of the cancellation. His voice broke. "It was the same week I told you I got the internship in New York, the unpaid one, the one where you helped me with rent." I said nothing to the machine. I remembered that week, the excitement in his voice. The choice was instant, automatic. His opportunity outweighed my trip. I called the agency and canceled. I never told him about the Paris plan. I did not want him to feel burdened. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered into the phone. "About Paris." I could not answer a recording. Then I found my old checkbook, from high school, the one for the custodial account. I looked at the deposit slips. My summer job money, $50 a week, and next to each of my deposits you deposited the same amount. Every time I never noticed. I just saw the total growing. I thought it was my savings. He was silent for so long, I thought the message had ended. "I've been sitting here," he said, his words slow, dazed, "trying to add it up, not just the money. The things, the times you said you were tired and went to bed early, but I saw you sewing my coat button on later. The smell of hospital on your clothes when you hugged me. The sound of your alarm at 5 a.m. for the early shift. The way you always said you didn't want dessert, you were full. I never asked if that was true." The message was not a plea. It was a recitation, an awakening. "Chloe's father asked me what I owed you. I didn't know. I'm starting to know. It's not a number. It's the quiet in your house now. It's the space I was supposed to fill and didn't. It's the trip you never took. It's every time you made my life possible by making yours harder. And I called it a complication. I called you not necessary." A sob escaped him, raw and ugly. He did not try to hide it. "I am so ashamed. I am so sorry, Mom, not for the loan, for everything. For every single time I took from you and called it mine." The message ended with a final, choked sound, then the click of the disconnect. I stood in my quiet kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I rewound the tape and played the message again. I listened to the cadence of his grief. I analyzed it. Was it performative? A final, sophisticated manipulation to regain the financial safety net? The details were specific. The envelope, the travel agent, the checkbook. They were not generalities, they were forensic. He was auditing his own history, and the sum was devastating him. I felt a shift within me, not a softening, but a recognition. The mechanism had achieved its deepest purpose. It was not the financial collapse that was the point. It was this horrific, clear-eyed look at the ledger of love he had spent without acknowledgement. I did not call him back. I needed to sit with this. I needed to see if this was a moment of passion that would fade or a genuine pivot. The next day, there was no message. The silence felt different. The previous silences were filled with his brewing anger or panic. This silence was filled with his shame. It was a heavier quiet. I went about my days. I met with the roofer. I agreed to the estimate. I wrote the check for the deposit from my savings, not from any account linked to him. The transaction was clean, simple. Beverly called. Radio silence from his counsel. The bank reports the vehicle has been repossessed. The loan is in collections. His credit is ruined for the foreseeable future. What's your read? Do you want to pursue anything else? The custodial account. No, I said. Not yet. The financial action is complete. The objective is achieved. And the personal objective? She asked gently. It is in progress, I said. I believe he is beginning to understand the cost. Good. That's the real victory, Ellie. Not breaking him, but making him see. After I hung up, I went to the strongbox. I took out the handwritten list I had made, the accounting of financial injections. I read it. Then I took out the old Paris brochure, the one from my own files, a duplicate of the one I sent him. I placed them side by side on the table. The list was numbers. The brochure was a dream deferred. Together they were the story. He was finally reading it. I waited. I knew he would contact me again. But the nature of the contact would be different. It would not be a demand or a negotiation. It would be a surrender or an offering. I did not know which. But I knew I would not have to speak the language of business next time. He had finally learned the language of the ledger. He was finally reading the true balance due. The silence that followed his message lasted for 3 days. I did not replay it again. Its contents had been absorbed. I occupied myself with practical matters. The roofers began their work, the rhythmic pounding a solid, present sound. I sorted through old clothes for donation. I balanced my checkbook to the penny. On the evening of the 3rd day, the weather turned. The drizzle became a steady, cold rain driven by a sharp wind. It was the kind of rain that soaks through a coat in minutes. I was in the living room, the sounds of the storm against the windows a comfortable backdrop to my reading. The doorbell rang. I knew who it was. The timing, the weather, it felt inevitable. I marked my page and set the book aside. I did not hurry. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. He stood under the porch light, but it offered little shelter. He was drenched. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He wore no jacket, only a thin sweater that clung to him. He was shivering violently. His face was pale, etched with a misery that was not performative. This was not the angry, entitled man from 2 weeks prior. This was someone hollowed out. I unlocked the door and opened it. I did not open it just a crack. I opened it fully. I stood in the doorway, the warm light from the house spilling out around me, illuminating the sheen of rain on his skin. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out at first. He swallowed, tried again. Mom. His voice was a rasp, ruined by cold and emotion. I said nothing. I waited. I'm sorry, he said. The words were not part of a speech. They were expelled, like something he had been carrying that was too heavy. I am so sorry for everything, for the wedding, for the phone call, for every single day I took you for granted. The rain fell between us, a curtain of silver needles. I was ashamed, he said, the confession ripped from him. I was ashamed of where I came from, of this house, of my clothes from discount stores, of the fact that my mother was a nurse who worked nights. I thought it made me look lesser, to Chloe's family, to my colleagues. I thought if I could just distance myself, I could be someone new. someone who was just Marcus Thorne, not Alina Vance's son who she worked herself to the bone for. He was crying now, the tears mingling with the rainwater on his face. He made no effort to wipe them away. The wedding, it wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. Chloe's mother said it would be simpler with just their side, more cohesive. She said your presence would be a reminder of a different world. And I agreed. I told myself you wouldn't mind. I told myself you'd understand it was for my future. I lied to myself so I wouldn't have to feel like the traitor I was. He swayed slightly on his feet from cold or exhaustion. And when you called, I was scared. I was cornered, so I was cruel. I used the coldest words I could find to push you away, to make it your fault. Because if you were just being difficult, then I wasn't a monster. He hugged his arms around himself, his teeth chattering. But I looked at the numbers, Mom, the real numbers. The money is one thing. I can't pay it back. Not now. Maybe not ever, the way things are going, but the other cost. The Paris trip. The nights you went hungry so I could have seconds. The dreams you had that you just put in a box. For me. I traded them for a fancy car and a condo and the approval of people who look down on everything you are. He took a shuddering breath. Chloe is at her parents'. She says she needs time. Her father offered me the money again, with the papers. I told him no. I can't sign away the last piece of myself to pay a debt to you. It felt like the final betrayal. I'd be using their money to erase you completely. He looked at me, his gaze desperate, seeking something he had no right to seek. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. I needed to say it to your face. I needed you to know that I see it now. I see the structure, and I set fire to it, and I'm standing in the rain watching it burn. He fell silent then, spent. The only sounds were the rain and his ragged breathing. I looked at this man my son brought to utter ruin, not just financially, morally, emotionally. He had achieved the full understanding I had intended to force. The revenge was complete. It lay before me, shivering and broken. This was the moment, the climax, the plea. I did not feel victory. I felt a profound, weary sadness. The mechanism had worked perfectly. This was the predicted result. Come inside, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the rain. You're freezing. He stared at me as if he hadn't heard correctly. He had prepared for a closed door, for more silence, for final judgment. An invitation was not in his script. Take off your wet shoes on the mat, I instructed. I stepped back, holding the door open wider. He moved slowly, like a man in a dream. He stepped across the threshold, bending to fumble with his soaked sneakers. He left them on the rubber mat. He stood in my foyer, dripping onto the tile floor, a pool of water gathering around his socks. He looked lost, afraid to move further. Go into the living room, I said. Sit by the fireplace. I'll get you a towel and a blanket. He obeyed, moving like an automaton. I went to the linen closet for a thick towel and an afghan my mother had knitted. When I returned to the living room, he was standing before the cold fireplace, staring at the family photos on the mantel. He was not touching anything, just looking. I handed him the towel. He took it and began to dry his hair, his movements clumsy. I draped the afghan over his shoulders. He pulled it tight around himself, his shivers beginning to subside. Sit, I said. He sank into the armchair, the one his father used to sit in. He looked small in it. I went to the kitchen. I filled the kettle and put it on the stove. I took out 2 cups. I performed these familiar actions while my mind assessed the new landscape. The confrontation was over. The plea had been made. A new, more complex phase was beginning, one for which I had a plan but no script. I carried the tea into the living room on a tray. I set it on the coffee table. I took my own seat on the sofa, facing him. He was watching me, his eyes wide, waiting. I poured tea into both cups. I handed one to him. He took it with both hands, clutching it for warmth. Drink it, I said. It will help. He took a sip, then another. Color began to return to his lips. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the ticking of the clock and the distant drum of rain on the new roof. The door was open. He was inside. The next words would define what happened now. I had thought about this moment. I had terms. They were not financial. They were far more costly. The steam from our tea rose in thin tendrils between us. He held his cup as if it were the only solid thing in the world. I let the silence hold for a moment longer. This was not a pause for effect. It was the calm before a necessary truth. "I heard your message," I began. My voice was calm, conversational. "I believe you understand now the scale of it." He nodded, a jerky movement. "I do. I didn't, but I do now." "Understanding is the first step," I said. "It is not absolution." He flinched but held my gaze. "I know." "This," I said, gesturing with my cup to encompass the room, the situation, "changes nothing about the financial consequences. The bank will not reverse its actions. Your credit is damaged. The car is gone. The mortgage will be more expensive. Those are the results of your choices and my response. I will not intervene." "I'm not asking you to," he whispered. "Good." I took a sip of tea. "What I am offering is not a financial bailout. It is a possibility of a different relationship, one built on honesty, not on sacrifice and silence." He waited, utterly still. "There are terms," I said. "They are not negotiable. First, acknowledgement. You will write a letter, not to me, to yourself. A full and detailed accounting in your own words of what you have understood. Not just the money, the emotional cost, the Paris trip, the nightly alarms. The second helpings you took while I said I wasn't hungry. You will not show it to me. It is for you to keep, to read when you are tempted to forget." He nodded slowly. "I can do that." "Second, therapy. Individual for you. To understand why you were so eager to erase your past and to build a sense of self that isn't based on shame or borrowed status. I will provide the names of 3 therapists. You will choose one and attend weekly sessions for a minimum of 6 months. You will provide me with proof of attendance. Not details, just proof." His face tightened, but he did not protest. "Okay." "Third, you and I will attend 3 sessions of family therapy together. After you have begun your own work, the purpose is not for me to harangue you. It is to establish a new way of communicating. A way where my feelings are not dismissed as sentimentality and your struggles are not hidden as shame." "And if Chloe," he started, then stopped. "That is between you and Chloe," I said. "My terms are for a relationship with you. If she is part of your life and you both wish it, she may be included later. But that is not my concern today." He absorbed this. "What else?" "That is all. There is no 4th term about money or help. You will solve your financial problems yourself. You will live within the new means you have created. You will not come to me for loans or guarantees, ever again." He let out a long, shaky breath. It seemed to hold a strange relief. The rules were clear, hard, but they were a structure. A different kind of structure than the one he'd lost. "And you," he asked, "what do you get from this?" "I get the potential for a son who sees me as a person, not a resource," I said. "I get the peace of knowing I stated my hurt and my needs clearly. I get to live my own life for myself without the constant background worry of your stability. That is what I get." He looked down into his tea. "It's more than I deserve." "That is not for you to decide," I said. "I am offering it. You can accept the terms and begin the work, or you can leave now and we will have no further contact beyond what is legally necessary through Beverly. The choice is yours." He did not hesitate. "I accept all of it. I'll write the letter tonight. I'll call the therapists tomorrow." "Good." We drank our tea. The silence now was different. It was not the silence of a standoff or a void. It was the silence of a contract being reviewed in the minds of both parties. "I am sorry, Mom," he said again, but this time it was a statement of fact, not a plea. "For the specific, awful thing I did, and for the 1,000 small things that led to it." "I know you are," I said. "Now, the apology is received. We do not need to speak of it again. The actions moving forward are what matter." He finished his tea. The color had fully returned to his face. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a weary determination. He stood, placing the empty cup carefully on the tray. He folded the Afghan neatly and laid it over the back of the chair. "I should go," he said. You've given me a lot to start with." I stood as well. I walked him to the foyer. His shoes were still damp. He put them on without lacing them. At the door, he turned. He looked at me, and for the first time in many years, I saw my son looking at me, not through me or past me. "Thank you," he said, "for opening the door." "You are welcome." He stepped out into the night. The rain had softened to a mist. He walked to his car, an older sedan I didn't recognize, parked at the curb. He got in. The taillights glowed red in the damp darkness, then receded down the street. I closed the door. I locked it. I returned to the living room and gathered the teacups. I washed them in the sink, drying them and putting them away. I turned off the lights. I sat in the dark living room for a time. The confrontation was truly over. The terms had been set. The emotional climax had passed. I felt drained, but clean. The poison of the betrayal had been extracted, not by ignoring it, but by confronting it with surgical precision. The wound was open, sterile, and now had a chance to heal properly, though the scar would remain. I had not forgiven him. Forgiveness was a feeling that might come in time, or it might not. It was not required. What was required was a new framework, and I had built it. I had moved from victim to claimant to architect of a possible peace. The revenge was complete. It had achieved its purpose, not his destruction, but the restoration of truth and the potential for a real, if smaller, relationship. The balance had been corrected. The ledger was closed. I went to bed. I did not dream. I slept a deep, untroubled sleep. The work was done. The next steps were his to take and mine to observe. The power was no longer about leverage. It was about the choice I had made to offer a path and the choice he would have to make every day to walk it. The new roof was finished. A clean, gray slate that promised decades of shelter. I stood in my garden a month after that rain-soaked night, examining the first buds on the rose bushes. The morning sun was warm on my neck. I wore a wide-brimmed hat and my oldest gardening gloves. The soil under my knees was dark and rich. My life had settled into a new rhythm. It was quieter, but the quiet was chosen, not imposed. I had booked the trip to Paris. The departure date was 6 weeks away. I had arranged for a neighbor to collect my mail. I had purchased a new guidebook. The planning was a concrete activity, filling a space that had long been occupied by hypothetical worry. My phone, resting on the garden stool, buzzed. I sat back on my heels and pulled off a glove. It was a text message from Marcus. Our communication over the past month had been sparse and specific. He had sent a scanned copy of his signed intake form for a therapist, Dr. Abrams. He had texted once to confirm our first joint session was scheduled for the following week. The messages were factual, devoid of emotional pressure. I had replied with equal factuality. Received. Acknowledged. This text contained no words. It was a photograph. The image showed his hands, dirty with soil, cradling the root ball of a young tree. The background was a patch of earth near a brick wall I recognized, the small communal garden area of his condominium complex. The tree was a slender maple sapling. A second text followed. It read, "For new roots." I looked at the picture. The symbolism was clear, perhaps even a little deliberate, but the action was real. He was planting something. It required effort, foresight, a commitment to tend it for years before it provided any shade or beauty. It was an act of faith in a future he would not immediately harvest. I did not overanalyze it. I typed a reply. It needs regular water for the first year. His response came quickly. I know, I said, a reminder. I placed the phone back on the stool. I felt a small, definite shift inside, like the final tumbler of a lock falling into place. This was not forgiveness. It was observation. He was doing the work. He was engaging with the terms. That was the agreement. I returned to my weeding. Later, I went inside to wash up. On my desk, next to the Paris guidebook, was a brochure for a river cruise in Burgundy, sent by the travel agency as a follow-up. I had circled a few stops. I was considering an extension. The doorbell rang in the early afternoon. It was Beverly, holding a bag from my favorite bakery. "A social call," she announced. "No billable hours." We sat at the kitchen table with coffee and pastries. She updated me without my asking. His attorney called to formally close the file. The loan is in collections. Marcus has retained a financial advisor to restructure his debts. It will be a long climb, but he's facing it. No attempts to contact me for clemency. Good, I said. She studied me. And you, how is the architect of all this? I am well, I said, and found I meant it. I am planting things. I am planning a trip. Paris? Yes. She smiled, a genuine, warm smile. I'm glad. You pulled the house down around his ears, Ellie, but you didn't walk away from the rubble. You handed him a broom and a blueprint for something different. That's a harder thing to do. It was the only thing that made sense, I said. Destruction was not the point. Truth was the point. We finished our coffee. After she left, the house returned to its quiet. It was a quiet I owned. I no longer listened for the phone. I no longer felt the hollow space his betrayal had carved. It had been filled not with him but with myself. My own plans, my own peace. The day of our first joint therapy session arrived. I drove to the therapist's office, a neutral space in a professional building. Marcus was already there, seated in the waiting room. He stood when I entered. He looked thinner, more grounded. His eyes were clear. Mom, he said. Marcus. We did not hug, we nodded. The therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Lowell, opened her door and invited us in. The session was difficult. I stated calmly the depth of the hurt. He did not deflect. He listened, and when it was his turn, he spoke of his shame without using it as an excuse. We did not resolve anything in that hour. We began. That was all that was required. After the session, we walked out to the parking lot together. He said, "Thank you for coming." I said, "I will see you next week." He got into his sedan. I got into mine. We drove off in different directions. That evening, I finalized my Paris itinerary. I booked the river cruise extension. I wrote the checks for the deposits. The transactions felt significant, a direct transfer of resources toward my own joy. Now in the garden once more, the late afternoon sun slanted across the lawn. I had finished my work. The beds were weeded, the new plants watered. I put my tools away in the shed. I stood on the back porch, looking at the order I had created. The roses, the herbs, the clean lines of the vegetable plots. It was a small, manageable world that responded to care. My phone was inside. My suitcase, soon to be packed, was in the closet. The strongbox in my desk held the legal documents, the old invitation, the ledger. It was an archive now, not a weapon. The revenge was complete. It had taken everything I thought I wanted and revealed what I actually needed. I needed to be seen. I needed to be valued. I needed to reclaim my own narrative. I had achieved that, not through his suffering, but by forcing a reckoning that allowed us both, perhaps, to become more real. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. I went inside. I closed the door. I did not lock it against any specific threat. I simply closed it, marking the end of the day, the end of the season, the end of this long and necessary chapter. Tomorrow, I would work in the garden again. Next month, I would see Paris. The future was my own.